this webinar series has been held to cater even a larger number of teachers and created more convenience in terms of location and commuting, especially for far away and abroad teachers. So we are more than happy and proud to make this happen again this year. We hope that with the participation of ELT experts and invited speakers from well-known publishing houses such as Cambridge Assessment English, Cambridge University Press, eFuture, Macmillan Education, Macmillan Publications, National Geographic Learning, Oxford University Press, StudyCat, and VUS, the webinars will provide you with the most updated ELT trains and practical teaching methods and techniques that you can teach your class, online classes, more specifically, more effectively. All right, but before we start, let me just take out just 1-2 minutes very quickly to gladly announce the winners of the previous webinar lucky draw. I believe that you all been looking forward to this. Let me just share out the results. Here it is. So the 5 lucky winners will be rewarded with 5 free subscriptions to the fun English game-based language learning for kids by StudyCat. The winners are, can I hear some drum? Okay, Erica Rudas Padu, I'm not sure if I pronounced that name correctly. Miss Lê Thảo Vi, Miss Trần Phương Linh, Miss Kim Kite, and Miss Cecilia Aura Bubaran. Okay, so congratulations again on the 5 lucky winners. We still have several webinars ahead. Along with that are more prizes for you guys. So no worries if you haven't been selected throughout the previous ones, okay? I hope and I believe that you'll be lucky for the next coming webinars. Okay, so let me get back to our main content today. I won't keep you wait for any longer. Let me join to welcome Dr. Jing Xu from Cambridge Assessment English, who is going to deliver his talk about understanding automated assessment of speaking. Please be also informed that we will have the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. Also, during that time, I'll send you the links to complete a survey about this webinar and to download your certificate of participation. Now let's start our webinar today. Over to you, Dr. Jing Xu.
Thank you, Han. Not sure whether you can hear me clearly.
Yes, very much clearly, sir. Yes. Okay,
that's great. It's great pleasure and privilege to present at the VUS TESOL webinar. Hello from Cambridge, UK. And actually, Cambridge just celebrated the first Freedom Day yesterday on Monday because the government just lifted all the restrictions in the country. Hopefully, the country will hold on, and hopefully things will getting better in Vietnam as well. I'm gonna share my screen. I wonder whether the host could allow me to share my screen.
Already, sir. Let me check again.
Okay, yeah. All right, could you see my screen right now? Could you see the slides, please? I'm checking the chat right now to see clear. Okay, great. Okay, I'm gonna move ahead. First, let me briefly introduce myself. My name is Jing Xu, and I'm a Principal Research Manager in the Research and Thought Leadership Division of Cambridge Assessment English. My research focuses on technology-enhanced English language assessment learning, particularly on automated scoring and feedback. The talk I'm going to give today is Understanding Automated Assessment Speaking. In this session, you will understand how a speech auto marker works and how it is trained. You will also learn to pose the right questions to test developers in order to assess the suitability of automated assessment for your educational contexts. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. And I think the slide is, oh, okay, it's moving. Okay, so in this talk, I will begin with a discussion on different modes of speaking assessment. Then I'll address some basic concepts of automated speech evaluation, including the architecture of the automarker training and evaluation, and the limitations of using automated assessment of speaking. Finally, I will provide a list of questions to allow language teachers and learners to judge if automated speaking assessment would meet your assessment needs. All right, so I think my screen is stuck again. All right, and there are different modes of speaking assessment that a testing program can adopt. They can be generally categorized by two parameters: test delivery method and the scoring method. The most frequently seen models are cell 1, that is examiner delivered and examiner scored model, and the cell 3, that is computer delivered and a computer scored model, which have been highlighted in green. Each of these models bring its own advantages and disadvantages, which I'll explain later. It is important to know that it isn't a case of saying one type of assessment is better than another. Rather, we should consider what is appropriate, valid, and practical in a particular assessment context. Cambridge Assessment, for example, currently offer both examiner-delivered and computer-delivered speaking tests to meet their test users' various needs. So this is an example of the examiner-delivered, examiner-scored speaking test, or we call it a paired format face-to-face speaking test. And many people associate this test format with the speaking test of a Cambridge English qualifications, or CEQs. There are two candidates taking the test together with two examiners in the test room. And the examiner is sitting in front of the examiner sitting in the front is performing the role of the interlocutor, who is responsible for interact with the candidates. And a part of the reason for having an additional examiner also sitting in the room is the cognitive load that running the test places on the examiner who is acting as the interlocutor. The benefits of face-to-face speaking tests are that they allow for a broad test construct, as a wide range of skills can be assessed in such tests. Candidates may be asked to answer questions, engage in role-play activities, or collaborate with a speaking partner in solving a problem. The face-to-face speaking tests are thought to mirror real-world interactions, so they are a form of direct speaking test. And the face-to-face speaking tests are thought to have positive washback on teaching and learning. That is, when the candidates are preparing for such test, they're improving the speaking skills that are essential for daily communication. And the face-to-face speaking tests are not very much reliant on technology. However, face-to-face speaking tests also face a number of challenges. It is resource intensive to train examiners so that they can deliver test questions and mark responses consistently. Examiner training is typically costly and time consuming. It is also important to manage examiners' workload so that their marking is not affected by fatigue. It is also difficult to minimize the impact of speaking partners on one's test performances. There's a growing research showing that a candidate tends to perform better if he or she is paired with a highly proficient candidate. There are also a lot of logistic challenges such as test scheduling, room booking, score reporting, and examiners and candidates' travels to the test venue. If a candidate does not show up, then the ranked examiner resource is usually wasted, and it may take a candidate up to 2 weeks to receive the test results. In contrast, in a computer-delivered, computer-scored test, test questions are presented by the computer rather than an examiner. The questions are either displayed on the computer screen or presented via audio recordings. Candidates wear a headset and record their responses via a microphone. In some tasks, textual or graphic information is provided as visual input. And this test mode reflects to some extent oral communication in a virtual environment or digital age during the pandemic. And this is a speaking task from a computer-delivered speaking test called LinguaScale, and a small proportion of the oral test responses are marked by a computer. The task is called Answer Phone Message with Visual, in which candidates receive a voice message asking for help, and the information needed to solve the problem is presented on the screen, and the candidates are expected to respond based on the visual input. And automated speaking tests feature new nearly instantaneous score reporting, as computer scoring is super fast. And also, an auto marker has high internal consistency, which means once it is trained using machine learning techniques, it always marks spoken responses in the same manner. It won't change its marking behaviors due to fatigue, as often seen in human marking. And automated scoring also makes on-demand testing possible. That is, candidates are no longer required to book a place to take the speaking test. They can take the test anytime on computer with high-speed internet connection. Of course, an automated scoring reduces the cost of running speaking tests that would otherwise be spent on examiner training and examiner marking. And finally, automated scoring has the potential for providing detail-oriented feedback for learners' speaking performances. And this is not possible to do in face-to-face human mark speaking test, as it is too labor-intensive for examiners to provide such feedback. But the challenges for automated speaking tests are that it requires expertise in machine learning, speech recognition, and natural language processing to develop automated systems. And the automated systems usually have low tolerance on background noises. For example, if the test room is noisy, or there are two candidates speaking at the same time, the accuracy of the computer scoring will significantly be reduced. But this could apply to human marking too, if the audio quality is low. In addition, some candidates may prefer human-human interactions in a speaking test, as they may feel uncomfortable speaking to an imagined interlocutor. Without being able to negotiate meaning with the interlocutor, their performance may be affected. Some candidates may also cast doubt on the accuracy of computer marking, which may lead to their negative perceptions of the test. So now we're gonna open the black box and discuss the architecture of a speech automarker. A speech automarker receives learner speech as an input and produces test scores as output. And a speech automarker typically consists of three components, including a speech recognizer, which converts speech into text, and a feature extraction component, which select linguistic features from the speech input and pass them onto the scoring model, which is the grader, the third component. The grader is actually a statistical model which predict a learner's oral proficiency based on linguistic features, and it is trained on human annotated data and using machine learning technologies. The features which the automarker look at usually tap on subcomponents of oral proficiency, such as pronunciation, fluency, vocabulary use, grammatical accuracy, etc. These features are often aligned to human assessment criteria. I will unfold these ideas later. This picture shows the two components of the speech recognizer, the first component of the automarker. On the left side is the acoustic model. The acoustic model takes in audio signal and maps sounds to phonemes or words. On the right side is the language model. The language model is used to estimate the probability of a hypothesized word sequence based on training corpora. The training corpora are a large collection of transcribed either native English speech or learner speech. And such corpora tells the speech recognizer what are possible word combinations and what are not. To give an example, the speech recognizer receives audio signal that sounds like recognized speech. The acoustic model can transcribe the speech input in two different ways, either recognized speech on the left or recognized speech on the right. However, based on the corpora, which consists of native speaker speech, the second one, recognized speech, is a low frequency word sequence. It's almost impossible. It's never seen in the corpora. So the automarker will accordingly select recognized speech on the left as a more plausible transcription. This figure shows the change of word error rate across different L1 groups or first language groups. The word error rate is a metric that is used to measure the accuracy of speech recognition. So the higher the word error rate is, the more errors the transcription contains as compared to human transcription, human expert transcription. The accuracy of automated speech recognition may vary across speakers of different first languages. And this accuracy on particular accent depends on the extent to which this accent is represented in the training data. So the basic idea is that the more the speech recognizers see in the training data, the more accurately the automated speech recognition becomes. Here, I think that the most accurate L1 speech recognition on L1 is Gujarati. And this is quite outdated data back in 2016 because the training data consists of large amounts of Gujarati speakers. So the speech recognizer tends to be more accurate on this particular L1 group. And the accuracy of speech recognition may also be affected by the speaker's oral proficiency. So you can see on this graph, the word error rate tends to decrease with the increase of the speaker's oral proficiency on the CFR scale from A1 to C. So C1 or C2 candidates are more proficient speakers than the other categories. And their speech tends to be more intelligible, clearer, and more fluent. And this actually had an impact on the performance of the speech recognizer as well. Now I'm gonna talk more about the scoring features in the feature extraction component. And you may understand that the auto marker actually does not understand your language, but they try to extract linguistic features from your speech. And they try to assess different subcomponents of oral proficiency, use approximate features, or we call approximation. So for example, pronunciation is measured by the phonemes that were possible words which are pronounced correctly, or the median of how confidently a word could be matched to audio. So basically how easy it is to match the sound onto English. So this is an indication of the clarity of speech. And the vocabulary, for example, is measured by unigram or bigrams. So unigram is single words, bigrams are 2 consecutive words, and trigrams are 3 consecutive words. And the idea is to compare the vocabulary used in the response with the training data in terms of similarity. So in terms of vocabulary use, is the response more similar to a C1, C2 speaker, B1, B2 speaker, or A1, A2 speaker? So the similarity measure actually tells you how good your vocabulary use is as compared to a reference group of speakers. And the grammar is measured by part of speech tagging, or POS tag similarity. And it's determined by the depth of the grammatical parsing tree, which I'm gonna delve deeper into in the next slide. And the fluency is sort of a measure on acoustic features. It's, for example, it's measured by how fast phonemes were pronounced in your speech, how fluent you are, how many pauses there are in your speech, and the mean length of runs, like how long you can hold your speech on average. And coherence is measured by the relationship between words in the same sentence and how likely it is for them to stick together. So basically the ideal flow are the words that occur in a sentence likely to appear together as a bundle. And topic relevance can be measured in different ways. And the most typical way is coupling between words that commonly occur in the questions and answers. So for example, the question about how the weather in Vietnam, and so you would expect that the candidates to include words like rainy, sunny, windy, temperature. So those keywords are highly relevant to the topic. And the topic relevance measure will look for such relationships between the questions and answers. So this is a picture of a grammatical parsing tree. So when the speech is transcribed into text, the parser will further decompose the sentences into different parts and tag them with grammatical features. For example, this is a sentence called "then a thought occurred to me." It can be passed into an adverbial phrase in the beginning, then, and then followed by a noun phrase, a thought. A thought can be further decomposed into a, which is an article, and thought is a noun phrase. And occurred to me is a verb phrase, and it consists of a main verb, occurred, And then to me, the prepositional phrase, which consists of preposition and the pronoun. So the deeper this tree is, the more complex the sentence is. If you have a relative clause, the tree gonna be even deeper. Now I'm going to talk about the training data that we use to train the auto marker. The training data usually consists of two components. One is learner data, so how learners actually use the language. This includes the language performance data, like the audio recording of their speech, the expert transcription of their speech, and also learner characteristic data, like their first language, their age, their gender. And we know that the auto marker is quite sensitive to learner background. They may be performing better on particular L1s than others, or they can be performing better than on adult speech than children's speech, or they perform better on female speech than male speech. So these are important information we need to feed into the auto marker training. And also we have expert data, which are usually human evaluation on learner speech. And like they could include grades or scores, or also flags of malpractice. If you can tell that this is memorized speech and the candidate is not responding to the question, but try to recite something, and then the examiner will flag that, and then this will be fed back to the auto marker training as well, teaching auto marker to recognize memorized speech or off-topic responses. And also we have annotation data, which is mainly used to annotate errors in learner speech. And this part of the data is very useful for training the auto marker to give feedback on your performance, rather than in addition to giving a score. So the auto marker can be trained to provide a diagnostic feedback, for example, on your pronunciation, on your grammar, etc. This is something I'm going to tap onto quite shortly. And then how are we going to evaluate the auto marker performance? The most kind of basic way to do is to use percentage agreement between the auto marker and the human on CFR grading. So this is the recent evaluation stat we had from lingual skills speaking auto marker, and we can see that we have three different measures. One, the exact agreement, which means the auto marker and the human markers agree exactly on the same CFR level. So in 56% of the cases, the auto marker and the human gave the same CFR level. And the adjacent agreement indicate the difference between the two are within one CFR level. And you can see that almost 97% of the cases, the difference between the auto marker and an experienced human examiner is less than one CFR grade. And the mismarking is something we don't like to see, and it's sort of a discrepancy between the auto marker and the human examiner. And the discrepancy could be beyond one CFR level. Unfortunately, there's only 3% of cases in the evaluation. So in a nutshell, the auto marker is performing adequately in marking learners' responses in lingual skill. And also, we can train the auto marker to detect some malpractice. For example, you may suspect that a candidate is not speaking English or is code switching between their first language and the target language, which is English. And the examiners can easily tell that. How could we train the auto marker to detect this aberrant behavior? So actually, we have a language quality component in speech recognition, which tells you how confident that the speech that auto marker received is English speech. And you can see we recently did a study to compare two groups of speakers. One group is asked to respond to the task in purely English, and the other group is told to code switch or purely speak their native languages in responding to the questions. And you can see there's a big difference between the two groups in terms of language quality score. So this indicates that a language quality measure in the auto marker is very sensitive to non-English speech, and it is capable of flagging responses that are not spoken in English. And also, because lingual skill is sort of medium stakes test, we have to make sure that the auto marker score are reliable. And we know that in 3% of cases, the auto marker is off the chart. It's sort of deviant from the human score. And how can we tell that? So we have a confidence score, auto marker confidence score in place to predict auto marker reliability. And then the confidence score indicate how similar the response it receives is to the training data, if it's very different than from the training data, then the auto marker lacks the confidence in making a judgment. So in this case, it will tell the examiner that it's you who need to mark this response. So examiner mark will override the auto marker score in such cases. And you can see this in this figure, the y-axis is the difference between the auto marker score and the human score. And the x-axis, or the horizontal line, is the language quality score, the confidence measure. You can see on the top left corner, so the difference is quite large, but on the bottom right corner, all the dots or the data points are clustering together, indicating in this range, the difference between auto marker score and the human score is very minimal, very small. It's barely distinguishable. So it is only in these cases we will release the auto marker score confidently to candidates. And for all the data points on the left of the red vertical line, these data points, these responses have to be remarked by human examiners. The human examiner mark will override the original auto marker score. So based on this mechanism, the Cambridge assessment actually have a hybrid marking model in place. So when the auto marker is confident with its scoring, the auto marker will release the scores to the candidates directly. But if the auto marker indicates low confidence in scoring, it will escalate the responses to examiners for double marking, for remarking. So with this system in place, we are very confident that we release reliable scores to candidates. And this is something about automated feedback. I'm not sure whether you have access to this from Vietnam, but this is a free website that you can practice speaking using automated scoring technology. The interface is pretty much like Linguaskill, but it's on a mobile app. It's called the Cambridge English Speak and Improve. And there are tasks similar to Linguaskill speaking test. And you can practice speaking using the app, and you'll receive instantaneous scores from the auto marker based on the CFR level, based on the CFR scale. And on the right side, you will see a chart which indicating your strength and weakness in 3 different dimensions of oral proficiency, including fluency, pronunciation, and content. So this feature are currently being developed and is not seen in the live product, but it will be coming soon for practical use. And also the engineering department of Cambridge University, who we collaborate with, is working on developing automated feedback for spontaneous speech. For example, this is a sentence produced by a French speakers of English, and he said, it's very cheaper for customers. Actually, it should be cheaper, right? But you can see below cheaper, there's a confidence score, which is 0.7486, which is lower than other words. So in this case, the speech recognizer will recognize this word as cheaper in terms of a phonetic symbol, and it will feedback to the learner that, okay, you may have mispronounced the word cheaper, and the syllable that you didn't, the consonant you didn't pronounce correctly is CH. So this feature is currently being developed as well, and we hope to roll out this feature in Speak and Improve soon. All right, now we have covered everything about automated speaking assessment, and I'm going to talk about limitations of such tests. Although they look quite top-notch and cutting edge, they have limitations as well. First, an automated speaking assessment cannot assess dialogic interactive speech. This is because the auto marker cannot score 2 speakers at the same time and cannot distinguish like speech from 2 different, produced by 2 different speakers. For this reason, the automated speaking assessment have a narrowed language construct. So there's no assessment of negotiation of meaning, and they not understand jokes, playful language, and they not understand sarcasm, etc. Those high-level language performance. But it's trained purely to extract linguistic features to predict your oral proficiency. So if you want to use the auto marker as a sort of speaking partner, it's not possible to do that. And the auto marker reliability generally higher when the quality of the training data is good. For example, if you want to apply automated speaking assessment in Vietnam, you have to make sure that the training data consists a lot of Vietnamese speakers of English. So the auto marker is confident to recognize this particular L1 group speech. And also the auto marker is quite sensitive to background noise. So if there's a lot of background noise in the test room, or the two candidates are sitting too close with each other, then the auto marker may suffer from low accuracy because of the background noise. And also, generally speaking, the auto marker is less robust than human examiners in detecting malpractice. Although we are working in that direction, the research is quite promising, but we still rely on human, mainly rely on human to detect those aberrant test behaviors. Okay, to conclude this presentation, I will share with you some tips on how to assess the suitability of automated speaking assessment in your own context. You have to pose a few questions for the test developer before making the judgment. First, you have to ask the test developer, what data has the auto marker been trained on? Is that children's speech, adult speech? What are some L1 groups that the auto marker has been mainly trained on? Does it conclude the L1 speech in your context of language use? And also, how is the test administered in practice? Is that administered in quiet test room? Is there any remote proctoring in place to capture possible malpractice, etc.? So these are key questions to the validity of the automated speaking assessment. And also, you may ask what speaking tasks are used in the test, because you know that in designing automated speaking assessment, the task types are kindly constrained by the technology. So it won't allow you to actually assess interactive behaviors. And in some tests, the speech production is sort of simplistic, like to repeating certain words, reading a sentence, or giving minimal response, and this not reflect natural language speaking. It's not really quite a kind of a natural way of speaking. So the construct actually is very different. Construct is the ability that you try to assess in a test. The construct is very different from how we use language in the real world. So you need to look for a relationship between the language production in the tasks and the language production in the real world scenarios. And number 4 is what scoring features are extracted to inform a score. So you may want to kind of contact the test developer to ask these questions, like what features the auto marker actually use to predict a human score, to make a judgment of oral proficiency. This is concerned with the construct representation of the auto marker. For example, if we only look at the fluency of speech, it is a good predictor of oral proficiency, but what if candidates are speaking nonsense language? So if we only look at fluency, the auto marker is not reliable at all. It can be cheated easily. So the auto marker should have a wide range of features which cover all the criteria that human examiners use to assess speech. So there should be a close mapping between the two, right? The 5th bullet is that what is the potential for cheating on the test? And we have basically covered that. So even if the auto marker is quite limited in detecting cheating, I think there should be complementary measures in place, like remote proctoring, or there should be vigilators in the test room walking around, making sure that candidates are not really reading scripts or not really surfing the internet while taking the speaking test, or there's not a second speaker actually who is speaking on behalf of the candidate. And at this stage, I don't think we can tell whether there's an imposter who's taking the test on behalf of the candidate. And number 6, what is the impact of the test on language learning? We hope that the test has a positive impact on learning. If the automated speaking assessment is only assessing minimal languages, like repeating words, reading sentences, then I think that the learners will prepare the test in the same way, and they will imagine that speaking is like this, but this is not true, because speaking is more complex, especially from spontaneous speaking. It's more demanding, and that the test should exert a positive impact on the way that learners learn the language. And number 7 is there a good fit between the purpose and the stakes of the test and the test used. So if it's if there's a need that you have to assess a very large number of candidates in a very short time frame, and the stakes of the test are not that high, it's not about admission or immigration, etc., then I think automated assessment of speaking is perfectly fit for the purpose. But if it's a test which would like to look at how candidates interact with the interlocutor, negotiate meaning, how candidates sort of use playful language, is joking, try to make it the conversation amenable as possible, then I don't think automated assessment will fit the purpose, because it's not trained to assess these constructs in the assessment. So it's all about the assessment context, how you're going to use the test for. So if you want to look into more details about these 7 bullets, I would suggest you reading the second article in this reference list. So this is a recent publication that we had as a book chapter called titled "Opening a Black Box: Exploring Automated Speaking Evaluation," and it just taps onto issues about how you should make selection of a reliable automated speaking assessment based on your context, your purpose of testing. Okay, I think I've covered everything. We're good on timing, and we have about 15 minutes for questions, and I'm going to open the floor for the participants to raise questions. I'm going to check the chat box quickly to see. Yeah, speaking improves all free. Yeah, try that. I think it's really cool. Actually it's a very similar auto marker which is being implemented in LinguaSkill, but it's an older version of the auto marker. There's a lot of text here. Yes. Are there any questions, I wonder, about this talk?
Dr. Jing, I saw several questions in the Q&A session, if you can have a look at that.
Okay, sure.
It's the Q&A part. I can see 4 questions already, 4 or 5 already there for you.
Okay, yeah, the first question is from Amir, and the question is, the speech recognizer able to accurately distinguish various accents of features of connected speech? The answer is yes. The speech recognizer is trained on connected speech. It's trained on speech of different proficiency levels, so you will see more connected speech in C1 and C2 speech. And also the speech recognizer of LinguaSkill is trained on, I think, more than 10 L1s. So it's sort of it has a balanced performance on different L1s. I think Vietnamese is part of the training data. I hope this answers your question. Yes, and also I think there's similarity in Asian languages. So I think that the auto marker performed equally well. Learners from Singapore, Malaysia, Vietnam. So we have a sort of a set of data which is actually collected from Southeast Asia. Okay, the second question is anonymous, from an anonymous attendee. Is Cambridge going to adapt automated speaking assessment in their standardized testing in the near future? Wow, this is a huge question. I can tell you that people in the research team are working toward that, but they are highly cautious because those standardized tests are very high stakes. It usually determine candidates' fate, whether they got admitted to a university, whether they can migrate to a different country. And so it's very sort of important decisions. So in modernize those standardized tests, we would like to have a human in the loop model as well. So we would like for human examiners to double check auto marker performance before we actually deploy the auto marker in the standardized test. But we are working on that direction, but we have to make sure that everything is ready. The auto marker, like the hybrid marking model, at least is performing well as the 100% human marking model in high stake standardized tests. before we can actually launching such auto-marked high-stakes tests. Yeah, the short answer is yes, but the time is not ripe yet. The third question is from, I'm not sure whether I pronounced that correctly, Gungyan. Sorry. I think speaking assessment includes other elements such as eye contact, facial expression, yes, body language, etc. How can we assess these by using automated assessment of speaking, also considering the time for a candidate to respond? Yes, that's a very good question. Yes, I think we are working on multimodal assessment, which taps onto nonverbal behaviors. But as I said, automated speaking assessment at the current stage has a narrow test construct. So it's mainly examining your speaking performance per se. So it's the linguistic features in your speech, and it's disregarding those non-verbal behaviors at the moment. That's why I said you have to make a judgment whether automated assessment is suitable for your context. Would you like to include the non-verbal behaviors in your sort of decision, in your assessment decisions? If non-verbal behavior is part of your test construct, then automated assessment is not suitable because it cannot assess those non-verbal communication. It's not a part of the construct. And also the time for candidates to respond. We actually did a lot of trialing to see how much time that a candidate would need to respond to each question. So the time allowance is usually set based on several stages of trialing, making sure that candidates from all levels, from A1, A2 to C1, C2, have adequate time to respond to these questions. Facial expression, I think it's quite of technologically demanding. That requires face recognition technology to capture these features. I have to admit we are not there yet. We're not there yet. The question from Andrew is that what statistics used to calculate probability of word sequence? I think it's basically a frequency. So it's like it's frequency, normalized frequency. So among like 10,000 words, how many times this word appear in the corpora. So you have to standardize the frequency so that you can compare one expression with another one. So for example, recognized speech is 0. There's zero appearance in the corpora. And some collocation may appear more frequently, like throw a party is throw, verb. A party is a noun, is a verb noun collocation. And this combination is quite frequent in the corpora. It's more frequent than create a party, which is not native like. It may appear in learner corpora, but not in native speakers corpora. So you don't say create a party or make a party. So these things do not appear in the corpora. So it's a low frequency expression. And also the other thing the other measure we can use called mutual information, which is a typical measure for to measure the association between two words. So it's a typical corpus linguistics measure, which tells you how likely the two words or even three words are going to co-occur and occur together in the same space, in the same context. So these are some measures for the language model in speech recognizer. There is also a question from anonymous attendee. How can we improve the realization of pragmatic features in scoring systems of automated testing? That's a very good question. I have to tell that pragmatic competence is not included in the current scoring model because you need to create training data for capturing those pragmatic features in speech, extracting those features in speech. I think in the current model, pragmatic competence is not assessed. But I think for future directions, we may want to annotate the learner data, the learner speech, using pragmatic frameworks, pragmatic theories, and then we can use that annotated data to train the automarker to recognize like excellent pragmatic competency in speaking performance. And there's also a question from an anonymous attendee. So specifically, what's your advice and a recommendation for us teachers in terms of assessing our students' speaking ability virtually? Okay, like apps, resources, tools to reflect on. We don't have developers, you know. Okay, I think Speak and Improve is a good feedback tool or app you can use freely. And it's a low stakes practice app. So sort of this automated tools can be used to reduce teachers' burden in the classroom. So because the tool usually give instantaneous feedback and also give learners a lot of opportunity to practice speaking. You know, speaking is a more like productive skills. It cannot be taught. It can acquire through practice based on a skill acquisition theory. So it is through a lot of practice, receiving feedback, and you can improve speaking ability. So I think in this sense, the speaking apps give the learners more opportunities to practice speaking, and also reduce teachers' burden to provide feedback, because the automated feedback is the baseline for teachers to work on. And a teacher can add on those automated feedback, like more on content of speech, because I think automated feedback is mainly on linguistic performance, like fluency or pronunciation. But I think a teacher may complement this feedback with like interaction with the speaker, like comment on the content of speech, and also try to explain the automated feedback for learners, like for consonant clusters. That the automarker may tell you, okay, you didn't pronounce this consonant cluster correctly, but the teacher can tell you what is the correct pronunciation and how close you are to the target, etc. So I'd envision that the low stakes automated assessment and teachers' feedback, teachers more like detail-oriented feedback, can be complementing each other to make classroom instruction more effective. But for high stakes tests, I would still prefer face-to-face speaking assessment, because I think in a high stakes test, learners are usually very nervous. They need a lot of scaffolding. They need a lot of support from the interlocutor, while the automated assessment cannot provide that support because you're talking to a computer. If you're stuck there, you're stuck there. So especially for low-level candidates who need a lot of support, I would suggest face-to-face, even virtually, a remote speaking assessment. So you can deliver speaking assessment using video conference technology, like either Zoom or Microsoft Teams. You can assess their speaking ability remotely without sort of asking a computer to deliver the questions. I think that will fit better for that assessment need. The next question is, what are test takers' feedback regarding the automated test? I don't quite understand. Oh, so you mean how test takers perceive? We actually did some surveys. I think it's 50-50. Some candidates do not fully trust the automarker scores. And some candidates feel more confident about speaking to a computer because they feel more intimidated when speaking to an examiner. They feel more confident when speaking to a computer. So I think it depends on the candidate's personality. And also we are trying to promote assessment literacy, telling candidates how the automarker works, and then what are the research that's support the use of automarker in live tests, such like this webinar. So we are trying to allow candidates and teachers, test users, to understand the mechanism behind the automarking technology to build the trust among stakeholders. So I guess that's why we are here to give this talk. I think we have probably 4 minutes left, right, Han?
Yes, I guess so too, Dr. Jing.
Okay, I think I'll pick 2 more questions. So I think I'll wrap up then after that. Another question from Andrew. Have you found any differences in automated assessment of speaking produced by children versus adults? Okay, that's a good question, because we train automarker on different data sets. And the children's speech is more challenging because children's speech is often incomplete and children's speech is less predictable, and children's speech is less intelligible as well. So I think generally the auto marker perform better on adult speech than children's speech, and it requires more efforts to collect children's speech data because it's difficult because of GDPR. It's difficult to gather children's speech so that we can feed the auto marker with such training data. So the short answer to your question is that the auto marker, generally we feel more confident for the auto marker to assess adult speech than children's speech. But I think for some constrained speaking tasks like repeating, reading aloud, I think a children's speech should do, the auto marker should do well on children's speech because I think basically the same thing, you're doing speech mapping to text. But for spontaneous speaking, children's speech is really hard to score because it's very unpredictable. Okay, now I'm gonna answer the last question. In general, is it easier for the speech recognizer to recognize low-level speakers or high-level speakers? Definitely high-level speakers, because high-level speaker speech is more intelligible and also more fluent. And they use vocabulary which are typically seen in corpora. Their speech is more predictable. For low-level speakers, it's a little bit difficult because you cannot tell whether it's, maybe their grammar or vocabulary is good, but because their pronunciation is really poor, so the speech recognition is not quite confident with low-level speakers. So in our current hybrid marking model, I think almost all the low-level speakers are piped to examiners because we don't quite trust the auto marker to mark low-level speakers. Their speech tends to be quite pausing and also chunky and also disfluent, and they use very strange vocabulary or even non-English words. So it just caused a lot of difficulty for speech recognition to function appropriately. Of course, you can use some coarse feature that like their fluency, but we know that the oral proficiency construct actually include other features in addition to fluency. So we rely more on human examiners to mark low-level speakers. Okay, I think we are good on timing, right?
Yeah, perfectly good on timing, sir.
Okay, great.
Are there any last words you would like to share to them before, like any wrap up?
Yeah, I think it's really my pleasure to give this speech and to promote literacy of automated assessment, because I think this is more like a black box to many test users worldwide. And we're trying to promoting this literacy through these webinars and also through publications of book chapters, articles, and also we are publishing another article, which is in the reference list. There's an article called Assessing Auto Speaking Using Automated Speaking Scoring Technology, which will appear in the Assessment Education Journal. And this is a research article which talks about the reliability of automated assessment. I think through these sort of dissemination research, we hope that people will build more trust in automated assessment. And we are doing hybrid marking because we are combining the strength of both auto marking technology and human marking to deliver reliable test scores.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your informative information and presentation. And thank you, everybody, for your participation. We hope that you enjoy our webinar today and will be able to apply the ideas to your teaching practice.
VUS, your English, your future.